Welcome again. I would like to re-welcome my guests from Cairo, Washington, and New York. I'm back to Dr. Tariq Fahmy, the professor of political science. Dr. Tariq, to what extent these are serious leaks, especially related to the American army image, and to what extent do you think this army is really effective? Turning mics. Of course, we will not witness a lot of implications in the operation. We know that the Secretary of Defense is a very important institution. They have their own strategy in the Middle East, but we need to distinguish between two things. Between the strategic structure of the Secretary of Defense and with other things that the other thing that may you're getting to understand the American strategy, the strategy for the American department, the strategy that the president could at least indicate in the first 100 days. That's somehow they are the outlines for this strategy. Then institutions of other institutions, including the Secretary of Defense, will try to implement this in different places. At the bureaucratic institution, they could implement these different institutions. Speaking about the USA, the attempt to undermine it, they are just some low rank or just an advisors. They are something ordinary. But what I mentioned, that also another important generals in the Secretary of Defense, and also there are other groups which your guesses know that those who I meant, because these groups had nothing to do with the leaks and with the strategic defense of the U.S. around the world. Turning Mr. Eric mentioned they are just advisors. Eric Bikes, yes, I meant the 3 advisors, but what I'm talking about for these dismantled in different positions in the U.S. Army, which your guess is turning mics. At this point, I would like to hear Mr. Eric point of view. Mr. Eric, question for you. My guest at Cairo, Dr. Tariq, mentioned that he is not speaking about the 3 advisors, but he is speaking about other names. So what do you think?
Well, I'd love to hear what those other names are, and I'd like to point out that we're conflating 2 different issues here. We've begun the conversation speaking about the Secretary of Defense and media reports that so far have been unsubstantiated and are illegitimate thereby. And we're not addressing the real situation, which is that we have a major process underway to overhaul the Defense Department, to strengthen America's national security presence, to do a complete civilian workforce realignment requiring direct reporting of lethality, readiness, and strategic deterrence, something that the civilian workforce has not been accustomed to. To be quite frank and self-effacing and honest, the United States military and its 1.3 million service members have become a less prepared fighting force under previous administrations, and the effort is underway to correct that. That's what Secretary of Defense Hegseth is doing, and that is what President Donald Trump has always believed in and has always worked towards.
Dr. Tariq, it's the idea of a previous former president or the president, we are speaking about Secretary of Defense. If the Secretary of Defense is aware of what is happening, we're not here to evaluate the behavior of the previous president or not. It's all about the U.S. rule and the Secretary of Defense rule, and what kind of impact they could have. I believe that the Secretary of Defense, with all these capabilities, will not be impacted. We have 2 main scenarios. The scenario with the American president's support for the Secretary of Defense, he might dismantle if the situation became worse. This, regardless of the majority in the parliament, is now we have seen the investigation started. Maybe another question will be asked for the advisor, national security advisor. I believe we will witness 2 main scenarios, and this will not be discussed in the American media because the American media is actually divided. Yes, there are some exaggeration in the U.S. media, but it's not now. It's about the image and reputation of the Secretary of Defense and its operations around the world. The U.S. Operating in different places, not only the Middle East, stunning mics. At this point, Doctor, I'm sorry for interruption, Dr. Tariq, but in regard to this point, which is very important, that these leaks happened, and this is a question for you, Dr. Ashraf. These leaks might consider a national security threat, especially that is related with the schedule of Yemen strikes. Do you think this might have an impact on the Yemeni file? Turning mics. It has no impact on the Yemen because Houthi is not a big country at that the U.S. might have a serious confrontation with them. The Houthi have a very low military capabilities compared with U.S. But the main point, again, the point related to these leaks, it's just a political maneuver against President Trump. If reviewed the Pentagon history, we have seen a lot of instances where there were some mistakes regarding protocol and in the communication. The bureaucratic institution learning from these previous lessons. That might happen the timing of dismantled because they did this leaks. And actually leaks is something we have seen a lot in Washington in different occasions. Turning Mike's, sir, Hawaii actually signal application is used especially to speak about a very sensitive military information. Turning Mike, it's a very important point because Pentagon and other institutions as an ICIA and the Security National System invest in $billions in order to secure the communication among individuals, whatever, in Washington and around the world. So we acknowledge, yes, it's a mistake by the Secretary of Defense. Even Hillary Clinton, when she conducting these communication using different application, that's not by the same security applications. It's something repeated among the American officials. That might be because Houthi is not the biggest and the most priority thing for the Secretary of Defense. It's not a mistake by the current secretary. Actually, we can see the same former Secretary of the Defense who committed the same mistakes. Who was just wanted to remove this censorship as these communication are secured. What I want to say, that this mistake by the Secretary of Defense might be an indicator to rearrange the security order. Maybe Trump did not want to have any future headache that would undermine his mechanism to change the internal position of the Secretary of Defense. And Republicans had given to Trump all the capabilities and will not oppose him despite the trade war. I also see the important statement by the Secretary of Defense as he mentions the ongoing strikes against Yemen. And you mentioned that these leaks will not impact the strikes on Yemen. Turning mics? Absolutely not. It will not impact the schedule of a strike because, again, Yemen is not this big a state compared with the U.S. power and the Pentagon. This communication through signal application, I'm not justifying on behalf of the Secretary of Defense, but I thought it's just something not very important for them. So why not we can discuss this through Signal. And by the way, Signal is also secured and encrypted, but of course a mistake that cannot be repeated. But we need to consider that President Trump insists to have Hegseth, and he's giving him all the capabilities and the authority to have the risk structure in the ministry. Trump is fully convinced with his nominations. Trump did not want to repeat his mistake with his previous administration. The previous administration of Trump did not give him any kind of support. For that reason, he insists to have these nominations, because all of these nominations came after a lot of struggle, after a lot of discussions, and he is fully supported for them. To have a new nomination right now, it was something that will cost the U.S. a lot. In order to have the accreditation, the agreement, turning mics, this point is very accurate. It's not something easy to replace Hegseth, to have a new nomination. I would like to move to Mr. Bari with this question. Dr. Bari, do you think this leak somehow, this leaks is an internal war between Trump direction, or Trump trained with another train, or it's actually a mistake? The investigations will continue, but it's not like an internal war that will have an impact on the Pentagon image. What do you think?
No, I don't think this is an internal war at all. I just think this is an old news story that has been resurrected to try to hurt the Trump administration, and we have to point out the narrative, and the narrative is to try to poke holes into the Trump administration and try to make a crack in the wall. First, it was with the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. Then it was with Elon Musk. If we remember, only a couple of weeks ago, they were trying to make a big problem between a relationship and Donald Trump with Elon Musk. And now it's the Secretary of Defense. I'm sure in another 2 weeks, they'll be trying to drive a wedge between Marco Rubio and Trump. Who knows? But that is the narrative that seems to be being played out. I don't see this affecting the Pentagon as a whole, and I certainly don't see a leak affecting an attack on the Houthis. And for that matter, even if the Secretary of Defense released that publicly on Facebook, it still wouldn't have affected the attack. The Houthis don't have the intelligence capabilities to stop our attack anyway. So, I just think overall this is just a big news story being resurrected.
Mr. Eric, after all this analysis and the point you have mentioned, Mr. Eric, but the actually consecutive crisis, Mr. Eric, do you see that there is a reflect or an implications even about how the American army is fighting because of this crisis? Do you think how this might impact the American army because after the problems for the Mr. Hegseth, do you think this would have an impact on the performance of the American army?
Well, I think that the comments of our colleague are right on the money. What you just heard is that there's a concerted effort against the president and the administration. The real issue here is the media industrial complex and its association with the deep state and the corrupting influence that it represents in terms of fundamental illogic and dishonesty and disinformation towards the American people, and sadly, reflexively towards our friends around the world. No, I do not believe that this will impact the fighting force in a negative way. I believe it will actually impact the fighting force in a positive way, because what's happening is the Defense Department is being cleaned out of people who are there primarily for social promotion, for diversity initiatives, for self-aggrandizement or other reasons, and is being backfilled with a new generation of hungrier, leaner, more committed and patriotic warfighters. I think that the trajectory of the United States security apparatus is headed in the right direction, and that is 100% due to President Donald Trump.
Dr. Tarek, again, my guest again accused the American media and its implications. I have the statement and report by one of the American prestigious American newspapers, the New York Times. What do you think the New York Times role in the disinformation? Mike's? everyone supporting Trump is an evil in the American New York Times newspaper. I would like to greet your guest as he mentioned the current dismantle happen in the cleaning happening inside the ministry. Of course, the ministry need a lot of review. It's something more than having 3 dismantles. Of course, there's a cleaning that will correct this direction. But at the end of the day, the Pentagon is strong. It's not only about leaks, information about the Houthi. As we mentioned, this had impact extended to the major operation of the U.S. So whatever it was, leaks by application, whatever was a range of security, something that might be repeated. And the issue is not about the protection by President Trump to the Secretary of Defense. Maybe the situation will evolve, but all of that referred that the institutions of power in the U.S. and the deep state in the U.S. will have a lot of maneuver with the American politicians. This is a current struggle in the U.S. And dealing with all of that is happening through different tools. You know that also President Trump has its own media tools, which have its impact. But the problem here is about the national security issue as I referred. Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with a president and administration according to a specific strategy. As you mentioned in the beginning, there is, as I mentioned in the earlier, there is no American strategy, and the recent ones happened in 2022. There's no American strategy that should control a lot of the principles and pillars, because what is happening in the Secretary of Defense, also happening in the Secretary of Treasury, and also happening in the Secretary of State. I don't want to just give a lot of examples. Please, that your American guests understand there is another chaotic situation in different departments, especially regarding the mics. They have my American guests mentioned before that it's not considered as chaotic. They stated that it's just correcting the direction. Turning mics, yes, but we are giving this academia analysis according to what we say. We are not Republicans or Democrats. We are describing the conflicting situations of authority. Turning mics. Some people are just supporting Trump. Turning mics. In another department, we will see another impact. See this resolution issued by the the Department of State, how it could impact the grants and USAID and other agencies related to the United Nations. There are a lot of decisions that will weaken the soft power of the U.S. In addition to what is happening in the Treasury Department, these are the car models. There are also another examples on the federal government. I believe this instability state will impact the U.S. relations with the world, not only the U.S. relations with its partners. Maybe the relation with partners have specific tracks, but with the international partners, with the international relations, please, we will witness a negative impact. Some will argue that the media is the main reason of the leaks crisis, but it's more deeper than that. The U.S. institutions have this important role. This will become, this is more beyond the media issues, even with the U.S. partners in Europe, and also in the context of the Russians listening mics. It had a lot of analysis. I'm so happy to have these discussions. I would like to thank all my guests from Cairo, Dr. Tariq Fahmy, Professor of Political Science, and from Washington, Mr. Eric Brown, Strategic Analyst with the Republican Party, and from New York, I would like to thank Dr. Bari Donadio, Political and Military Analyst, and from Cairo, Dr. Ashraf Singer, International Policy Expert at United Media Sector. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Eric.